Last in our series, English, Thought and Culture. So this is a little bit of a sad lecture for two reasons. One, because it's the last in our series, but also because of the subject. It says the decline of Britain in the 20th century. And the literature we're looking at is The Soldier by Rupert Brooke. So this is all about, we've started in the Elizabethan era in the late 16th century, and how this English and then British culture grew and became strong, and how it created this vast empire in all of the world. It also talks about how that English culture went to America. A nation was formed there. We've talked about India, talked about Ireland, but now we see how this in a sense great empire declines, or we see the beginning of how it declines in the 20th century. Okay, the course title, English Thought and Culture. I think you know my name by now, Jake Organ, and this is how you can contact me. So, before we do look at the lecture, let's look at Britain in the 20th century, so from 1900 to 1999. So, in 1922, the British Empire held sway since they ruled over 458 million people, 1/5 of the world's population at the time. So that was a vast empire. The empire covered more than 33,700,000 kilometres squared, almost a quarter of the Earth's total land area. Okay, so that's 1922. By the end of the 20th century, Britain's overseas possessions consisted of a few small islands, and Britain faced big social problems. Okay, so by the end of the 20th century, I think, when was it, in the 90s, we lost Hong Kong. So now really the British Empire consists of the Falkland Islands in just off the coast of Argentina that we fought a war in 1982 to reclaim, and Gibraltar in Spain, which always causes a lot of problems with Spanish, with the Spanish government, but we still lay claim to the island of Gibraltar, Gibraltaric, and there's a few other little places. But really, Britain's empire has gone throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Britain let go of its empire, and now Britain is a small country with some quite major social problems. So what happened? Now that's many things happened, but the two world wars of the 20th century were very key to the decline of Britain. Now, as an English patriot, if you ever speak to a German, we would always, maybe on the football, you often see, Germany will beat England in the World Cup or in the European Championships. But obviously we have a history of defeating Germany. We always have a song where we say 2 world wars and 1 World Cup. That refers to the fact that Britain fought 2 major wars with Germany during the 20th century, which Britain won, which Britain were on the winning side of. They also, in 1966, beat Germany in the World Cup final, which we always remember. And this is, very important. Any Briton will say, oh yes, we won the world wars. But in reality, though we won militarily, we lost economically and socially. The strain, the pressure that these world wars put on the British Empire was enormous, and especially the Second World War really effectively bankrupted the British Empire. So we say that the First World War occurred from 1914 to 1918, and still by 22 we had this big empire. We can really say that the First World War was the beginning of the end of the empire. You know, the stress it placed on Britain, and the British Empire was enormous. Okay, the First World War. The First World War was fought between 1914 and 1918 and is often called the Great War. It was one of the deadliest conflicts in world history, with, if you take the minimum number of just deaths in combat, could be 15 million people died. But it's also, you could actually say it was actually 65 million died, because there was a major epidemic of Spanish flu that was often seen as caused by the war that killed maybe up to 65 million people. So that's you know, there's few wars or disasters in human history that were worse than this. The war was fought between the powers of the Triple Entente. Entente means sort of agreement. France, the Russian Empire, and Great Britain, and the Central Powers, Germany and Austria-Hungary. Now, Austria-Hungary was a big empire that includes modern-day Austria, Hungary, a lot of the Balkans, like Serbia and places like that. Czechoslovakia, this area. It was all one big empire before the First World War. Eventually Italy, Japan and the USA joined with the Triple Entente and sort of helped them out. And the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria joined with the Central Powers. So it was a world war. In reality, the majority of it was fought in Europe, in France and Belgium, and a little bit in Turkey, but really it was a world war because people joined in from all over the world. The war was mainly fought in France and Belgium in a system of what we call trenches. Trenches are a sort of a hole dug in the ground, so you know, both sides built a system of holes dug into the ground where they could sit under cover and fight the enemy. In 1918, the Triple Entente, like France, Russia and Britain, defeated the Central Powers. They defeated Germany and Austria. But in reality, the war had damaged a large part of the European economy. So in a way, these you can see the First World War as these European powers who are ruling all over the world fought each other, but in reality so damaged each other that they couldn't rule over the rest of the world anymore. So it was a very destructive war. Let's look at this whole idea of the trenches, because it's an important idea. Maybe if you put this into Google Images, you'll see pictures of these, like basically underground sort of tunnels where the war was fought. So after early attempts to achieve victory, you know, both sides tried to win. At the end of 1914 there was attempts of both sides to defeat the enemy, but it didn't work. And so both sides fortified themselves in a long system of trenches across France and Belgium. So basically you had a line of French and British troops holding a line of these fortified trenches, and then the Germans were facing them. So they'd all be sat there with their machine guns and their guns watching the enemy, but no one could break through. So from 1915 to 1917 millions of people died in attempts to break the stalemate of the trenches. Now, stalemate means where neither side can achieve victory. You have this in the game chess. You can have this in football. Sometimes, you know, the defences are too strong and neither side can achieve victory. And this is a stalemate. And this war was in this terrible stalemate. And millions of people died trying to break this stalemate. They tried to use chemical weapons. They tried to develop tanks. They tried to use aerial bombardments. But for this 3-year period, nothing could break this stalemate of trench warfare. The trenches, the whole idea of the trenches, have become a symbol of suffering and pointless death. You know, the First World War was a time where many people died. And many poor people died. You know, many very upper class, very rich commanders were sending poor men to their deaths in their millions. And this caused problems. This caused problems. In 1917, in Russia, there was the first communist revolution in history. The first successful communist revolution in history. And Russia became a communist country. And there was attempted communist uprisings in Germany at the same time. And in many countries, because of the upper classes pushing so many poor people, so many working people, so many people from the rural labourers, peasants, into the trenches just to die pointlessly, this caused a lot of tension in Europe, and it's caused the growth of communism. Some historians believe that up to 14 million men died or were wounded in the trenches or in the battles to break the stalemate. You know, so this is a vast amount of people, and people didn't like it. Now, like for me, as a young man growing up in England in the 1970s and early 80s, a lot of my idea of the First World War and the horrors of the First World War came from these guys called the war poets. This was a whole generation of poets who wrote about their experience during the First World War, and especially in the trenches. Okay, the most famous of these poets was Siegfried Sassoon, Wilfred Owen, and Rupert Brooke. These are the three most famous ones. Wilfred Owen is probably the most famous. He wrote a very famous poem called Dulce e decorum est, which basically means it's a wonderful thing to die for your country, but he's sort of saying, well, it isn't really. And it's a very clever and wonderful poem. And Siegfried Sassoon wrote a lot of war poems, and Rupert Brooke, who we'll look at today. And so a lot of our images of the suffering of the First World War came from the writing of these poets. Now, interestingly, a lot of historians, modern historians, are saying, well, actually the trenches were not so bad. The First World War was not so bad. But our idea of how bad it is comes from these poets. And, you know, it's true. A lot of our ideas of the First World War come from these guys, especially Wilfred Owen. And these guys have become romanticised because many of them died young. Like some of the romantic poets like Byron, like Shelley, like Keats, they died young. And these guys died young in battle, some of them. And that's a very romantic image of a poet. So let's look at Rupert Brooke, maybe the sort of most romantic of these, most inspiring of these poets. He was born in 1887 and died on the 23rd of April 1915 at the age of 27. So he died young. Unfortunately, he didn't die in direct combat. He died of an infected mosquito bite on his way to the battlefield of Gallipoli in Ottoman Turkey. So, to break the deadlock, the stalemate of the trenches, Britain sent a lot of its troops to try and invade the Ottoman Empire and to draw strength away from Europe. And again, it was another one of these pointless battles where many, many people died for no reason. And on the way to this battle, Rupert Brooke died. The Irish poet W.B. Yeats described him as the handsomest young man in England. And if you look at pictures of him, he's a very, very sort of beautiful, in a classic sort of romantic way, young man. So he became a symbol of the wasted youth through the First World War. It's said that a whole generation died during the First World War, and Rupert Brooke is a symbol of that, you know. He wrote many poems, but his most famous poem was The Soldier, which we're going to look at today. The Soldier is one of the great poems of the 20th century. It has been criticised for being pro-war and overly patriotic, because a lot of the war poets were anti-war. They were saying this patriotism is just driving. Patriotism is when you're very into your country, and British people, especially in the past, were very patriotic. But they were saying this patriotism is just driving young men to their deaths. So he's a contrast to the other war poets, because this is pro-Britain, this is pro-war. Thomas Hardy, a famous writer and poet and novelist and poet, wrote a poem directly against this. He skillfully uses some of the ideas from The Soldier to criticise The Soldier. However, despite all this, it's a beautiful and inspiring poem, and talks of many of the things we have studied in this course. So I think it's a good poem to end the course on, because it touches on some of the themes that we have looked at. Okay, it's a 14-line poem, sonnet. It's sort of an Italian sonnet. Remember the sonnets that Shakespeare wrote, Shakespearean type of sonnet. This is a different type of sonnet. This is an Italian sonnet. Brooke grew up in Warwickshire, in the centre of England. Now, do you remember who else grew up in Warwickshire? Of course, William Shakespeare. And Warwickshire is very much the centre of England. If you're in Warwickshire, you're right in the centre of that heartland that makes, England, And so some of the images that inspired Shakespeare are also some of the images that inspire Rupert Brooke. Okay? Let's read this poem. I think it's a beautiful poem. If I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England's. There shall be in that rich earth a richer dust concealed, a dust whom England bore, shaped, made aware, gave once her flowers to love, her ways to roam, a body of England's, breathing English air, washed by the rivers, blessed by sons of home. And think this heart, all evil shed away, a pulse in the eternal mind, no less. Give somewhere back the thoughts by England given, her sights and sounds, dreams happy as her day, and laughter learnt of friends, and gentleness in hearts at peace under an English heaven. So this is a little bit prophetic. Did he know deep down in his heart he was going to die? Because he's saying, if I should die, but he's going to war, so that was a big possibility. And because he died, this makes this poem immortal. Remember in Sonnet 18 about how as the poet, as Shakespeare writes about the person he's writing about, he says he's going to make them immortal by his words. In a way, Rupert Brooke made himself immortal through these words, because it's like talking about his death and what his death will achieve. It says, so if I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. Now, a lot of the First World War poets were saying, oh, this is pointless. You know, these young men dying on foreign fields is pointless. There's nothing to it. Why is it happening? Millions of people dead in Belgium, millions of people dead in France, millions of people, well, maybe not millions, but maybe hundreds of thousands dead in Gallipoli, in Turkey. What is it achieving? But Rupert Brooke is saying, if I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. So that through the death of an English soldier in another country, it's pushing England forward. That's what he's saying. It's very patriotic. This is a very military poem, you know. There shall be in that rich earth, so in the rich earth of Turkey or of Belgium or of France, a richer dust concealed. So it's saying that there's something special will be in that dust, in that earth. A dust whom England bore, as in was born, shaped and made aware. You know, the experience of life and the development of life was made in England. Gave once her flowers to love, her ways to roam, a body of England's, breathing English air, washed by the rivers, blessed by sons of home. Now, we remember Shakespeare, we remember the Romantic poets, and what was their big concern, what was their big thing? That is the beauty of the English countryside. And here it is again, a man preparing to die in the First World War, a time when Britain, the decline of Britain is starting, but still we have the same images, the beauty of England. And here he's from Warwickshire, and this is really the centre, this is real Middle England. Her ways to roam. You know, going for a walk on a summer's day in England is something very, very, very wonderful. You know, maybe on a Sunday after everyone's had their Sunday lunch, the whole family will go out for a walk in the countryside, and it's a very, very beautiful and wonderful thing. A body of England's breathing English air. You know, that temperate air, not too hot, not too cold, just perfect, that British people believe, English people believe England to be. Washed by the rivers. There's some lovely rivers in Warwickshire. It's saying washed by the river. Blessed by sons of home. Now, here's a very, very English viewpoint, but the sun is always a good thing when we talk about it in England, because the sun is never too hot. You know, like, I think probably 28, 29 degrees is the hottest it ever gets in England. So the sun is always a good thing. You know, people from a Saudi or from an Arab background always think, well, why do you go to the beach when it's sunny? Because you know, like, as an English person, we want the sun, because we always think the sun is a good thing. But obviously, living here, when the sun can get so hot, the sun isn't so much of a good thing. And obviously, English people that have travelled realise the sun in other countries can be really fierce and really difficult. But in the English sun is always a nice thing, and the poets always say that, and writers always say that. And now, the first 8 lines, usually in an Italian sonnet, the first 8 lines set the scene, and the next 6 lines then sort of go deeper into it. Well, this is what this one does. A normal Italian sonnet is slightly different, but basically the first 8 lines of the soldier sets the whole scene, but now the next 6 lines goes deeper into what he's saying. And think this heart all evil shed away, a pulse in the eternal mind, no less. Now here he's saying, in a way, it's a good thing to die. That it's a purifying thing. If he dies for his country, his soul will be purified. Maybe that's an idea that you have in your culture. You know, the idea of the martyr. And this is what he's saying here. And think, this heart, all evil put away. You know, he'll become pure by his sacrifice to his country. A pulse in the eternal mind, no less. You know, he's saying that as he goes back to God, he'll be purified because he's died in war. No less. Gives somewhere back the thoughts by England given. You know, so in some way, by dying, he's, you know, the soldier will then bless England. He'll give back the thoughts by England given. Her sights and sounds, dreams happy as her day, and laughter learned to friends, and gentleness in hearts at peace under an English heaven. Now, these lines are where it says some given the thoughts by England given. Now, there is a sense in English literature that England, especially England, is a blessed place, a happy place, an innocent place. If you go to England, even now, the police do not carry guns. And people from other countries, people from America, even people from France, Germany, think, how can you have police that don't carry guns? And, you know, England is changing, but for a long time, England has been a gentle place, a place of where people understand each other. People, you know, it's a nice community where people are friendly and people, to a certain extent, look after each other. This has been England in the past. Maybe now it's changing, but it's dreams happy as her day. English rural life in the 20th century, there is something special about it, I believe, as an English person. And gentleness, you know, English to each other are very gentle. Maybe to other people they're not so gentle. in hearts at peace under an English heaven. So basically he's saying that if he dies defending all this, he's giving something back to England. He's defending the gentleness, he's defending the peace. By dying, he's adding to that specialness that he believes is England. Yeah, so this poem is a good poem to finish on, because again it's showing some of the themes that we've looked at, the specialness that the English people perceive their country, you know, the specialness of the countryside, the special gentleness and temperateness of the weather, and the patriotism that British people have felt for their country over the years. Okay, and let's just read this one more time, because I think it's a very, very powerful poem. If I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England's. There shall be in that rich earth a richer dust concealed, a dust whom England bore, shaped, made aware, gave once her flowers to love, her ways to roam, a body of England's, breathing English air, washed by the rivers, blessed by sons of home. And think this heart, all evil shed away, a pulse in the eternal mind no less, give somewhere back the thoughts by England given, her sights and sounds, dreams happy as a day, and laughter learn to friends, and gentleness in hearts at peace under an English heaven. Okay, but as we know, despite the sacrifice of all those young men, a whole generation, the First World War was the beginning of the decline of Britain. But of course, throughout the 20th century, because of the rise of America, and now even because of the rise of India, the English language is still a very, very powerful and important force in the world. But the 20th century saw the decline of Great Britain and England directly. The 20th century saw that decline. And that's life. Some cultures rise and some cultures fall. Okay, you might be happy to know this is your last assignment, and there's some questions. The capital of Ireland is? Ulysses is a what novel? James Joyce was part of which literary movement? The First World War inspired a lot of, and Rupert Brooke grew up in the what of England? Okay, well that's it. That's the end of this course, English Thought and Culture. I hope you've enjoyed the course as much as I've enjoyed teaching it, and I hope this isn't a course that you end with. I hope this is a course that will be a beginning for you in learning about and studying about and enjoying English literature and English thought. Some of the poems and the novelists that the novels that we've studied are some of, I believe, some of the greatest writings in the English language and indeed in any language. So I hope this course will inspire you to read more of English literature, English thought and English poetry. And I hope that will help you develop in your English skills and your knowledge of the English language, and help you to attain your goals. Thank you very much. This is the end of the course.